Let me bring in my guest for today. This gentleman is a history professor, and he is running for the 42nd district here in California. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Liam O'Mara. Liam, what's up? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. This is getting down to the wire here, so it's sort of fascinating.
Very much. This is Election Day Eve, and I think everyone's anxiety is very high. And well, let's start here. You are a history professor. Has there been a time overall in contemporary American history where it's been quite like this, in your opinion?
Not
Start
quite.
off light.
Yeah, not quite, of course. I mean, there's always changes. There are certainly parallels to different aspects of it. I mean, the disregard for our institutions and sowing doubt about elections as a whole, that's relatively uncommon, certainly for the major parties. And we've certainly not often had administrations that have been this disastrous for our overall rights and security and everything else. But there are certainly parallels. I mean, the kind of fear-mongering that you saw with Nixon's run in '68 is actually quite similar to a lot of the rhetoric that Trump has used throughout his time in politics. So there's definitely parallels there.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say that Bush was overall still worse than Trump. I mean, I know we're comparing, we're comparing pretty repulsive things here, but I would say that Bush, what the Bush administration has done to this country, I mean, we're still feeling the effects from. And, unfortunately, 8 years of Obama did little to stop the war machine in that regard, just kind of let it continue. And Trump, he hasn't started any illegal wars of his own yet, but if he gets a second term, who knows? He might be able to.
On that, I would actually disagree.
What illegal war did he start?
One with Iran, which we don't really talk about.
No, he did it. He illegally assassinated a general. I mean, he definitely,
a major political figure, which
absolutely
is active war, and then he parked a U.S. carrier group off the coast and has been invading their airspace and their water space the entire time, trying to provoke a wider conflict.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The Iran deal was certainly problematic in itself. He's not actually withdrawn troops from anywhere. He's actually increased the number of deployments. He's increased military spending. He still has us fighting in 8 different countries. We're still bases in 80 countries. Trump is not opposed to the military-industrial complex.
No, he's not. I did not say he was. I said that, I think overall Bush has been even more disastrous, but that's because Bush had 8 years to do what he did. And he also had people like Karl Rove and, Dick Cheney and the Halliburton machine behind him, making sure this whole axis of evil thing was sold to the American public. I don't think the Trump administration or the Obama administration has done anything quite to that level. Again, we're comparing very, very repulsive things. The whole idea that Trump was some kind of non-interventionist is, of course, a total lie that you just dismounted. And I think anyone really paying attention has dismounted. He said a couple nice things that he wants to bring troops home. And a couple times folks even believed him. But it ended up being a lie, just like everything else he sold.
Sadly, a lot of his supporters do seem still to believe it, and he's still campaigning on it because they pay a lot more attention to the rhetoric than the realities. I think the biggest difference in any of these administrations is one of overall competence. The Bush administration did have more competent people, and they were able to pull off a number of things that the Trump administration has tried to do and failed to do. But we also haven't noticed tons of the damage that's taken place behind the scenes, where he has put in experienced operators who have actually done a tremendous amount of damage to institutions. I mean, the biggest difference between the two of them really is just going to be the amount of lives and treasure spent. That's, I think, the only real edge that Bush has on him. And Bush is much more part of an overall continuum. He didn't depart much from traditional American norms in the post-World War II period, with the massive spending and corruption that you've seen, especially in more recent decades, where Trump's populist rhetoric does make him only a partial insider and a partial outsider to a lot of those traditional networks of power, but
That's
he's
the lie
brought
that
in
he
some of
sold.
the others.
Yeah, that's the lie that he sold. I mean, he sold this lie that, and he's leaning on that lie again. I don't know if you noticed that, but he is leaning on that lie again.
Oh, yeah.
That he's the outsider. He's not the outsider. The only way he was an outsider is first he was the one buying the politicians, and then he thought, you know what? I don't need to be the middleman. I'll allow myself to be bought and enrich myself.
No. See, that's actually a different issue, though.
It's not.
In the sense of departing from corruption, he is no different from everyone else. He's just as much susceptible to all the same lobbying pressures. It's the same oligarchy that's in charge now.
Right.
What he departed from is some of the traditional power structures within the two-party system, which is essentially, in many ways, still part of the same overall, bought power structures. This is why you've seen so many of the traditional movers and shakers in the Republican Party coming out hard against him, and so many former, Republican strategists, leaders, and whatnot, people out of office have come out against him.
I think this is dangerous. I think this is dangerous, to tell you the truth. I think trying to make it seem like he's an outsider to the overall GOP is the absolute wrong way to go. Because here's the thing, when you line it up policy to policy, well, let me ask you this. Policy to policy, how is Trump different from the GOP?
He's not.
He's not.
And that's not really the point, though.
What's the point then?
The point is that Trump plays much more directly with the actual base that the Republican Party has been cultivating for some time, but trying still to also to restrain the worst aspects of. He's willing to play the part of an outright demagogue, as opposed to any kind of politician where you at least, even if you're aiming at a particular awful base, you're still going to make certain noises to be, for everybody. And Trump makes no pretense of wanting to represent all Americans. He only wants to represent his Americans, and he basically has taken a lot of the mask off of what the Republican Party has been doing. And in that way, he departs from a lot of their traditional intra-party power structures. In terms of what he's doing policy-wise and in terms of the appeals to the base, he is no different from any of the other ones. He is exactly the same animal.
I feel like that second part is infinitely more important than that first part, because that first part, if we want to just put it very bluntly and sum it up, he's meaner. He's a lot more mean. He talks a lot meaner. There's no subtlety in anything he does, which is true, which is absolutely true. But where I think that society has gone wrong for 4 years and counting is not just really tying that and pinning it to the GOP. Be like, look, this is what the GOP is. This ugliness is the GOP. He's not some outsider. He's not some rogue actor. Mm-hmm. He's just the GOP minus subtlety.
Exactly. He's taken the mask off. And in that way, and I think this will probably make more sense to you then, what he's basically trying to do is, well, like you said, remove all the subtlety and nuance from it, but he's revealing what the Republican Party has cultivated as its core base and constituency for decades. And the previous party leaders have tried to distance themselves, at least in some way, to use more dog whistles than Trump is willing to do. Trump is willing to just come right out and say it. And it's astonishing in some ways, but also kind of understandable that despite the utter lack of subtlety to all of us watching, his base takes it in exactly the same way as all the previous ones, in that they still want to see themselves as, not really the racist, or not really the ones who oppose the Constitution, not the ones who are taking away our freedoms. They're still exactly the same kind of deflection. And again, he isn't really departing from the techniques there. He's just so much more blunt about it and so much more willing to play the part of the overt authoritarian. The whole president for life, that kind of stuff. We've not seen that. We've seen people playing with the same kind of rhetoric and ideas and playing on the same psychology or emotions, but we've never had someone coming out and saying, you know what, it might be great if we just didn't have freedoms for more Americans, and if we did have a dictator, that might be great. No American president has ever said anything like that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news Get your news on with Ron. Don't you wanna know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your